The practice of magical evocation. The magician will certainly find it useful if an example of a genuine evocation is given here, for in no book written up to now will he find such an exact description of an evocation in accordance with the universal laws. As far as the general setup is concerned, it is left to the magician to make any small changes or additions here and there and to adapt it to individual situations and circumstances under which he intends to carry out the evocation. The best thing, of course, is, if he has available for this high purpose a special room which will only be entered by him alone. In such a case he should not even ask another person to do the necessary cleaning. A room like that will, in the truest sense of the word, serve as a temple. If the magician is in such a lucky situation, he is able to have regard to all laws of analogy, and he can furnish and adapt the room in the same way as the old magicians had their temples established, which had an altar in the east. The magician may, in accordance with the degree of his maturity and his religious belief, place on the altar a symbol of his deity, or he may set up in the middle of the altar a magic mirror, like the old initiates and magi did, and place on either side of it a candlestick with 7 arms and a censer between them. Formerly temples were usually embellished by 4 columns ornamented with various symbolic figures, each column representing one of the elements. The walls were decorated with pictures symbolizing various deities of the 4 elements. In the days of yore only such initiates, as were members of the highest social circles, could afford such temples. Unfortunately there will be only few people also today so wealthy that they can afford such a splendidly equipped magical workshop. This information refers only to the essentials, and every magician, whether poor or wealthy, should therefore be able to practice magical evocation, even should he have no special room at his disposal. The magician is not bound to any special place, and he may carry out the citation in a bedroom as well as in a kitchen. Even an attic or a suitable place in a cellar may serve the purpose and enable the magician to carry out a faultless evocation. If the magician has none of the above-mentioned possibilities, then all he needs to do is to betake himself to a lonely place somewhere in the open air where he is sure that he is not being watched by anybody and, consequently, can work without being disturbed. Of course, conditions like this cannot be taken into consideration in detail in the description, and every magician should know best how and where he may carry out his operations. Since it is easy to understand, I have chosen as the example of an evocation the Venus intelligence called Hagiel. The magician will, of course, proceed in the same manner in respect of any other spirit being or intelligence. However, he will always have to take into consideration the laws of analogy effective in each individual sphere in respect of the accumulation of colored light. Before the magician begins the actual evocation he must know in advance exactly, apart from having worked out a precise plan, from which plane or sphere he intends to call a being, or intelligence, and what he intends to ask from it. In Part 2 of this book, dealing with the hierarchy of beings, the magician will find a number of good, i.e., positive, beings of various individual spheres, a large selection, enabling him to choose the being, according to his wish, which will help him to realize his plans. It must be understood, however, that this book by no means gives the reader complete information on all beings and intelligences, for there are thousands of them in each plane and sphere. But the intelligences mentioned will be, in general, sufficient for practical work. Let us assume that the magician has decided to evoke the Venus intelligence named Hagiel and that he intends to ask this intelligence for luck and success in his operations, in which he has to rely on the friendship and sympathy of a certain person, for the Venus intelligence will serve this purpose well, since it is endowed with all such faculties as friendship, love, luck and success. Before starting the evocation the magician takes a bath or at least cleans his whole body, for one should not evoke a being in an unclean state, especially if a high and good intelligence is to be evoked. An evocation not only requires a clean spirit and a clean soul, it also requires a clean body. If it is not possible to bathe or to wash the whole body, the magician must at least carefully wash his hands. Everybody is able to do this, and therefore it must never be forgotten. When washing, the magician has to concentrate on the idea that all unfavorable physical and psychic influences run off with the water. Prepared in this manner, the magician takes his magical implements, one after the other, from their depository and puts them on a clean, preferably new, piece of cloth which has been kept in the depository especially for this purpose and which is to protect the implements from dust. Let us assume that the evocation of Hajiel is carried out in a normal living room. See that during the whole evocation you are not disturbed by anything, and, in order to evade any glances of curiosity, cover the windows carefully with a curtain. Then go and change your clothes, i.e. put on your magic garments, first your silk stockings, in cold weather your silk underwear, and house shoes. The evocation already starts with the act of dressing, for you must concentrate on the thoughts which are to do with the evocation only. So bear in mind that by putting on the clothes you are insulated against all unfavorable influences that may come from the universe or the invisible world. When dressing, you must be entirely sure that your body is not being influenced by any being, whether good or evil. Then, after having dressed, this meditative attitude of being completely insulated and protected must be maintained. Then put round your waist your magic belt and be completely taken up by the thought that you are the sovereign over all elements, the master of all powers. Finally you put round your head your magus band or put on the magic headgear with a feeling of true relationship to God, and that not you as a magician, but that God is actually carrying through the whole operation. You must unite yourself with the divine principle inside you in such a way that you have the feeling that you are the deity itself. Having done all this, you are able to go a further step in your operation. You light the magic lamp, which, in our case, must fill the room with a light green light. Set the magic lamp in a place round which you will be able to draw the magic circle or hang it up in the center of the room. This does not mean that the lamp must be exactly in the center of the room, though it would have the advantage that the whole room gets an equal light. Your next task will be the setting up and impregnation of the magic mirror, if you like, of 2 magic mirrors. In this example instructions are given for the use of 2 mirrors. One mirror is to bring about the materialization of Hajiel in the physical world, the other is to keep off unwanted influences. Being conscious of the fact that not you, but the deity is carrying out the procedure, you create, by the help of the imagination, a great sea of light in a wonderful emerald color, which, also by imagination, you accumulate from the whole universe into the mirror in a manner that the whole surface of the mirror is taken up by this color. The power of illumination of the condensed green light must be so strong as to illuminate completely the room in which you work. At that moment you must have the imaginative impression that this accumulated light is actually a power matrix, a fluid, which can almost be seen by the physical eye. In any case you must have the permanent impression that you are moving about in the room in an oscillation of green light. This is the way to prepare, magically, the room for the being to be evoked, and in a room like this there will be no more obstacles for the being and it will feel the atmosphere of its own sphere. Already at the moment you accumulate the light you concentrate on the idea that the purpose of this accumulation is to condense the evoked spirit being in a manner that you can see it with your physical eyes and hear it with your physical ears. The stronger your imagination, belief, will and conviction, the better condensed and truer Hajiel will appear to you. When impregnating the room, do not forget to include that you wish the accumulated planetary light power to remain in the mirror and in the room until you dissolve it again by force of your imagination. Similar examples are given in Initiation into Hermetics in the chapter dealing with room impregnation, and here you find the evidence that all the exercises and magic operations of that first work have their special purpose. You will also see that when carrying out further magical operations you will not be able to do without any of these practices. If you have not actively gone through the exercises of the first book you are unable to get into conscious contact with any spirit being outside you, or of materializing such a being. Now you start impregnating the other mirror by charging it with the Akasha principle. Project, by force of imagination, into the surface of the mirror, which previously has been covered with a fluid condenser, the desire that not any disturbing being, Not any unwanted power or the like will penetrate into your workroom, into your evocational operating room. This has been the second step of your evocation. The room in which you work is now appropriately impregnated. However, you have yet another possibility. You can impregnate the mirror that you intend to use for keeping off unwanted influences with the wish that the being you want to evoke must appear in it. This impregnation, of course, must have accumulated light in the relevant planetary color. In our case it must be green. Now take a piece of blotting paper and cut into the shape of a heptagon. With regard to the various spheres, the blotting paper must have the following shapes: for the sphere of Saturn a triangle, of Jupiter a quadrangle, of Mars a pentagon, of the Sun a hexagon, of Venus a heptagon, of Mercury an octagon, of the Moon a nonagon. As far as the Earth zone or any other zones are concerned, the round shape of the seal is to be maintained. In its middle draw with green ink, or what is even better, with a green-colored pencil, the seal of Hagiel. See picture below. Symbolically redraw the seal with your magic wand or with the finger, concentrating into the seal Hagiel's qualities, which are luck, love, friendship, etc. Before the operation you can let the blotting paper soak in a fluid condenser and get dry again. Moreover, you must concentrate on the idea that this intelligence is allied to the sign and will react to it at any time, and be always willing to perform that which you, the magician, want it to perform. You must be aware of the fact that it is not you who draws the aforementioned sign, but God, and that therefore the intelligence will render absolute obedience to God. With this meditative attitude in mind, a failure is quite impossible. Your seal is now ready and you can start preparing the circle and the triangle. If you have a circle sewn into a piece of cloth or painted on a piece of paper, you put it on the floor beside the triangle and once more run over its lines with the magic wand or with your right hand, or with one finger of your right hand, meditating on the idea that they represent the eternity, the microcosm and macrocosm, that they are symbolizing the whole universe in its great and in its small aspect. The circle, in the middle of which you must stand when calling the intelligence, is for you the small and the great world. Your meditative attitude must be so strong that no other idea can exist in your mind at that moment. You follow the same procedure when redrawing the triangle, which represents the three-dimensional world, i.e., the mental, astral and physical world. In order that the intelligence you intend to evoke should appear not only in its mental, but also in its astral and physical shape, you must include this wish when you concentrate on your meditative attitude towards the triangle. Your imagination at the moment of drawing, i.e., redrawing, the magic triangle is as important and essential as the drawing, i.e., redrawing, of the magic circle. The magician determines the shape and the range of effectivity of the intelligence that is to appear. If he omits this, Hagiel will only appear to him in her mental shape and will consequently only be present in the magician's mind. The manifestation of Hagiel would not succeed, not as far as her appearance and, naturally, also not as far as her influencing power is concerned. If these preparations are finished, too, you put the triangle in front of the circle and place the seal prepared in the middle of the triangle. Some magicians intensify the three-dimensional effect of the being to be evoked by placing into each corner of the triangle a small spirit lamp and by lighting it. The fuel he uses must be an extract of spirit and chamomile, i.e., a fluid condenser in which the magician has already accumulated, by the help of imagination, the three-dimensional world. When the spirit lamps, which are provided with small wicks, are burning, much like the spirit lamps of laboratories, the power of imagination concentrated in the fuel slowly expands in the room as the fuel slowly evaporates. By this, the materialization of the evoked being is supported. However, the setting up of spirit lamps is not absolutely necessary, but it is a good aid, especially for beginners, for a beginner in evocational practice needs many more supports than a magician with experience in this kind of work. Beginners may place such lamps, in regular intervals, not only in the triangle but also along the line inside the circle. The number of lamps to be placed inside the circle depends on the analogous number of the relevant planet. In our case an intelligence is involved which belongs to the sphere of Venus to which the number 7 appertains. For your information, the relevant numbers are given below which belong to the planets. If necessary, use for the Earth zone 10 lamps, for zone of the Moon 9 lamps, of Mercury 8 lamps, of Venus 7 lamps, of the Sun 6 lamps, of Mars 5 lamps, of Jupiter 4 lamps, of Saturn 3 lamps. The magician may also symbolize the elements in the circle, in which case he only needs 4 lamps. He himself stands in the middle of the circle as the 5th element, as the representative of the Akasha principle. When setting up the lamps, the magician takes into consideration the 4 cardinal points and places a lamp in the east, west, south and north side of the circle. It is entirely left to the magician either to express by the lamps the planetary number or to symbolize the elements. Of course, it is also possible for him to draw 3 circles. In the middle circle he puts 4 lamps, as the symbol of the elements. Into the external circles he places the number of lamps analogous to the symbolic number of the planet from which the being is to be called. Naturally, the setting up of lamps will complicate the preparations for the evocation, but the person able to provide himself with such lamps should not desist from using this aid, for the more aids to support his consciousness he has at the beginning, the better will he succeed. The sense now comes into the picture. The magician either places it between the circle and the triangle or directly into the triangle. The censer is either filled with burning charcoal, or has a wick and over this a little copper plate fixed. This plate is heated by the flame. The powder in the censer must in all cases correspond to the being's sphere and is to be placed on the plate. Since, in our case, we are dealing with an intelligence from Venus, ground cinnamon bark will suffice as incense. Only a small quantity should be used so that the room just faintly smells of cinnamon. Cinnamon tincture can also be used, and a few drops of this substance must then be poured on the copper plate. You will get this liquid substance from any chemist, though you may also prepare it yourself, if you wish. Just mix normal cinnamon with 2/3 of spirit of wine and let it stand and draw for 8 days. After this period filter it and the cinnamon tincture is ready for use. If, during magical operations, you do not intend to work with a censer, put a few drops of cinnamon tincture on a piece of blotting paper. In either case the smell of cinnamon will create a temple atmosphere agreeable to the intelligence of Hagiel, and this atmosphere will also help with the materialization of the intelligence in our physical world. The censoring of the room, however, is not at all so important as some books would have it. It is just another raid. Surplus censoring of the room usually has the disadvantage of making the magician to cough, which is neither desirable nor agreeable. Pernicious poisoning drugs and mixtures of narcotic substances will never be used by a true magician. If the magician is dealing with a being not belonging to any of the 7 planetary spheres and is not sure about the exact analogy in respect of the incense, he may use a universal fluid condenser when he senses his room. This rule is mainly applicable for beings coming from the Earth zone. The fluid condenser has to be appropriately impregnated, i.e., the accumulation of the light fuel has to be carried out at the same time as the magician is concentrating on the wish for success. Below you will find a list of the incenses to be applied for the various spheres. It must, however, be pointed out that incense can only serve as an aid for the materialization at the beginning. It is by no means absolutely necessary. 1. Zone girdling the earth, sage powder and elder pith, in equal parts. 2. Moon sphere, aloe powder is there. Only drug to be used, or intensified in the form of a mixture in equal parts of aloe, white poppy, storax, benzoe and pulveris camphoris, of the latter, however, only a very small pinch. 3. Mercury sphere, use mastic as the only incense, or, as an intensifying mixture, equal parts of mastic, incense, carnation blossoms, aniseed, juniper wood, chamomile blossoms and valerian roots, everything in pulverized state. 4. Venus sphere, take pulverized cinnamon as the only incense, or pulverized cinnamon flowers, floris cassia, in intensified form, cinnamon, rose blossoms, coriander seed quiendel blossoms, not lavender, but Floris serpulli, lily blossoms, all in equal quantities and pulverized state. 5. Sun sphere, as an isolated incense use sandalwood powder, as an intensified substance use a mixture of the following drugs: sandalwood powder, myrrh, aloewood powder, incense, saffron, carnation blossoms, laurel leaves, all in equal quantities. 6. Mars sphere, as an isolated incense pulverized seeds of onions may be used sec, as an intensified substance use the following mixture: seeds of onions, leaves of stinging nettles, grains of mustard seed, hemp seeds, rue leaves and peppermint leaves, all in equal quantities and in pulverized form. 7. Jupiter sphere, use as an isolated incense pulverized saffron, and as an intensified incense take a mixture of saffron, linseed, roots of the violet, peony blossoms, betony leaves and birch leaves, an equal quantity of each in pulverized state. 8. Saturn sphere, as an isolated incense use pulverized black poppy seed, as an intensified incense take a mixture of the following in pulverized state and in equal quantities: black poppy seeds, willow leaves, rue leaves, fern, cumin, fennel seeds. For all other spheres a substance in form of a universal mixture will suffice: church incense, myrrh, storax, benzo and aloe, pulverized and in equal quantities. For each act of censoring only the point of a knife should be used, either with the uniform drug or the mixture for each evocation. It is not necessary to fill the room with dense smoke, it quite suffices just to have the smell of the relevant drugs. Having done this, another preparatory step of the evocation has been completed, and you can now start with the actual evocation. Since we are dealing, in the assumed case, with Hagiel, that is, with a positive planetary intelligence, you may fasten your magic sword to your magic belt, on the left side of your body. If you have among your magical implements a dagger, you also put this implement under your belt, for a good being, no matter from which sphere it may come, will hardly ever require the use of a sword or a dagger. If, however, you were dealing with a demonic being, you would have to hold the dagger or sword in your right hand as the symbol of victory. Your magic wand would, in such a case, have to be in your left. By putting the sword to your belt you express the idea that the being concerned will not have to be forced by any means to do your will. With regard to stubborn beings, the magician will not be able to do without the sword or dagger. Negative beings are ordered by the magician, with the help of the flaming sword as the symbol of victory, to render him absolute obedience and to do whatever he wants. There exists not one demonic being which the magician would not be able to make obedient to his will. All he needs to do is to hold the point of his sword in the direction of the place where he wants the being to appear, and the negative being will immediately do what the magician orders it to do. Since every being has a drive of self-preservation, all demons are afraid of the magic sword or dagger, for in true relationship with God a magic sword or dagger would, to speak symbolically, tear a demon to pieces. Take your magic wand into your right hand, step into the center of the circle and concentrate on the idea that you are the center, that you are God, the sovereign of all spheres, and that you are with your all-consciousness at the same moment in the Venus sphere. As a divine principle you call in your mind the intelligence Hagiel as if you would call its name, in your mind, throughout the whole sphere of the Venus. You must be convinced that your calling the name is heard everywhere in the Venus and that Hagiel, acknowledging you as her God, also hears you. Remain in this state of stress for a few moments, for your spirit will then conceive that Hagiel is answering you in your mind. Since you are in the Venus sphere with your all-consciousness, you will first register Hagiel's voice as if it were coming from the inmost depth of your own spirit. As soon as you hear the voice of Hagiel and as soon as you are sure that you see the spirit being, you return to your soul, keeping up your consciousness of being God himself, and you will find yourself reunited with your soul within your physical body. Now call for Hagiel again, this time actually whispering, and repeat the name a few times in the same manner. You will at once realize that Hagiel is already in your astral atmosphere, that she is already present in your room. If your operations have been successfully carried on up to this moment where Hajiel has come to your place of working, above the seal, then call in an undertone, or even aloud, that Hajiel should appear to you physically. At the moment of transition from the astral to the physical world, never forget to convince yourself of the three forms of existence of your personality, so that you feel yourself allied to the astral body as a spirit and that you are with both these bodies at the same time in your physical body. This act of self-control is to help the being to follow the course of your thoughts and to betake itself from its own sphere into the sphere which you have prepared for it in your room. This means that the being appears in its mental and astral shape and that, depending on your power to materialize, it also assumes a physically condensed body. You can now see and hear Hajiel in your magic triangle, or, if you have appropriately prepared your magic mirror for the appearance of this intelligence, Hajiel will appear in the mirror in accordance with her symbolic layout of the qualities of the Venus sphere so that you are able to contact Hajiel consciously. Hajiel will appear in the shape of a queen with a most beautiful face, clear eyes and a well-shaped body. She is dressed in a green dress embroidered with gold and her head is ornamented with a royal crown. Her voice is so delightful that it cannot be described and everybody would regard Hajiel as the incarnation of beauty. Now it is up to you to tell this intelligence what you desire. If you intend to contact Hajiel repeatedly, then do not forget to make arrangements at this first meeting in which simple manner you may in future call this high and beautiful spirit being. If you are interested, you can also win Hajiel's servants for you. These are usually represented to the magician in their female shape. The servants of the Venus Queen are also very beautiful, as the magician may see himself. Evocations like these will bring you the most diverse experiences. To give you details on them in this connection is quite impossible. It is, however, left to the magician's own will to gain as much experience as he wants. I can only give here a few hints from my own experience as to how he has to go about, as a genuine magician, the evocation of beings. If you have reached an agreement with Hajiel on everything and if Hajiel has promised to fulfill your wishes, you can be sure that she will really keep her promise. All that now remains for you to do is to send this intelligence off again. You offer your thanks quite individually, for instance, by expressing your pleasure in the fact that Hajiel wholly acknowledges you as a genuine magician and is obedient to you, and then you ask the intelligence to return to her own sphere. With your consciousness you place yourself into the Venus sphere and concentrate by means of the imagination that Hajiel is returning from the partial sphere of your room to her domicile. After having done this meditative step, you return as a magician from your consciousness to your normal consciousness, thereby bringing the evocation to an end. Staying in the room in which you have carried out the evocation, you will find yourself, for a while after Hajiel's departure, in a state of happiness. A feeling of bliss will pervade you, and, as if dominated by true happiness, you will find yourself in a state of exaltation. If you please, you may remain in the room within the magic circle for some time and reconstruct the whole experience with Hajiel once more in your mind so that you will remember well every part of it when you completely finish your revocation. By help of imagination you dissolve the accumulated light into the universe. Take the sign out of the triangle and put it away in safekeeping. You can leave the circle without any danger, put out the lamps, etc. All magical instruments and aids are returned to their repository. If Hajiel has informed you of any special knowledge which you should not put down in writing, but merely keep well in your head, the knowledge being intended for you alone, then you must comply with such a wish. Otherwise you enter the procedure of the whole evocation into your diary to enable you to keep a good control over your workings and to have a reference book for them. You can follow the same procedure as with Hajiel in respect of any other being from any other sphere. By and by you will also become a perfect master in this respect and your personal experience will grow immensely. The description of the practice of a magical evocation is herewith completed.